Welcome everybody. My name is Cesar Murals. I'm the Folk Art and Social Change Fellow at the Philadelphia Folklore Project. And I am here with Lorena Manriquez, an award-winning independent filmmaker and president of Andes Media, and of course, the filmmaker for Siqueiros, Walls of Passion. Well, Lorena, first thing I want to say is congratulations on just making such a wonderful film. It was extremely enjoyable to say, it was extremely enjoyable to watch. So I want to start off this interview with a really quick question. Probably the kind that you've already heard a million times before. What inspired you to do a film on Siqueiros?
Oh, well, thank you for that lovely introduction. And I'm really thrilled to be screening the film at the Philadelphia Latino Film Festival. I am really happy to show the film to the world. The inspiration about making a film about Siqueiros came because I live in Los Angeles. And I found out about Siqueiros because Siqueiros was, the city of Los Angeles and the Getty Conservation Institute, they were conserving a mural that Siqueiros painted here in Los Angeles called América Tropical. I had never heard of América Tropical, let alone I never really heard of Siqueiros previous to 2009. And then very quickly I found out that Siqueiros was one of the greatest masters from Mexico, that he had painted masterpieces, murals, amazing murals across the world in the Americas, and that he had painted this amazing mural here in LA that was very controversial. The mural had been whitewashed in the 1930s, shortly after he had painted it, because Siqueiros was the kind of person that no tenía pelos en la lengua. I don't know how to translate that into English, but just basically he spoke truth, right? And so his mural América Tropical, they didn't like because it portrayed an indigenous man crucified with the American eagle right above, signifying the imperialism of the United States throughout Latin America. And I guess also, the man was an indigenous man or person of color. So it wasn't just Latin America, it was probably other people too. So basically I was very interested and I Googled him and saw the art that he had produced over the 20th century and read the Wikipedia entry of him and his work, and I was just mesmerized by the work that he had produced during this whole time, and I felt, wow, how come I'd never heard about this amazing artist? And I thought, the more I learned about him, the more I thought, well, somebody needs to tell the story for the American public and the world. So yeah, that's how it all sort of started.
Wonderful. And I mean, it became a touch point for the Chicano movement. And I'm assuming, this is one of the horrible things about Q&As, I'm just gonna assume that most people watching this have an idea of the Chicano movement and what it signified. So I'm just gonna jump to the next point is, what do you think about the role of murals in the Chicano movement?
So, oh my gosh, it was huge, right? So flash forward, so the mural was whitewashed in 1932, 33 probably, it was completely whitewashed. So in the late 1960s, 1970s, this mural, this image that I was telling you about, the whitewash began to kind of crack and come off the wall, and the spirit of this indigenous crucified man began to reappear. And it was interesting because the whitewash had actually protected the mural. So it was kind of this ghost that came through and spoke the continuing truth, that continues to this day, the misinterpretation of what us as Latino and Latin Americans have suffered throughout the year, throughout the 20th century. And, you know, there's a lot of that going on even to this day. And so 1960s, 1970s, artists would go up there apparently and go look at this image that represented them. And then, you know, they began painting this story of their people on walls in Los Angeles. And this all happened during the Chicano movement, where a lot of Chicanos were going to the war in Vietnam and dying in huge quantities. And so, you know, people started to tell their stories in the barrios, in the, you know, Latin American and Latino and Chicano neighborhoods. And, you know, this whole, so there's Judy Baca that, you know, that started painting on the walls, and along with like a whole bunch of other Chicano muralists. But not only in Los Angeles, you know, and I'm thrilled that the film's going to be seen also by Philadelphia audience, because Philadelphia then years later became the capital of muralism in the country as well. Chicago, but, you know, it's sort of, I'm not really sure if it started. It's definitely started here in California, in particular Los Angeles, but San Diego. If you go to San Francisco, there's a lot, the Clarion Alley, and there's, you know, in the Mission District, it's like there's a lot of art and political art on walls. Yeah, so Philadelphia also, you know, you guys live in Philadelphia. I have not personally seen them myself, but I understand that Philadelphia is also a big place where there's a lot of murals and public art on the walls. So, yeah.
Yeah, the Mural Arts Project in Philadelphia does amazing things all across the city. And
right.
One of the great things about murals is that it's public art. You know, everybody has access to it. Everybody can see it.
Yeah. And so that's the beauty of Siqueiros' message and legacy, was that he wrote a manifesto in the 1920s, when, you know, after his conversations with Diego Rivera, and said, you know, let's get the art to the people, you know, the people that want to see these images and see themselves represented on the walls and in art. But it dates back to the 1920s, when he and Rivera were in Europe, and they started to see this, you know, inspired by the classic Renaissance murals, or, you know, or frescoes, they call them in Europe, and in churches, and telling stories on walls. So that's just the beauty of public art like you're telling me about. And it's important, you know, because not everybody has money to go inside a museum, you know, and public art's supposed to be for everyone to see, and, you know, and see themselves representing in their communities. So,
and the power of it is phenomenal. Last year, I believe the Whitney Museum of American Art, they released the exhibit called Vida Americana. Have you heard of it?
Yes, I was there. I was there on opening weekend at the Whitney Museum, right? And did it come to Philadelphia? There's another great exhibit at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. I don't know if you also saw it, but it was all about the Mexican artists, and how, you know, there were América Tropical, a photograph of América Tropical, of Siqueiros from América Tropical, was in Philadelphia. And a lot, you know, how Siqueiros influenced Pollock, and, you know, the whole era post-revolutionary art was in Philadelphia. I also went there to check it out. So yeah, but Vida Americana was at the Whitney Museum, and started in February of 2020, and unfortunately it was shut down. I was there on Valentine's Day, and that's when it opened to the public, and I was lucky that, you know, I saw it when I did. So it was just fabulous exhibit. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it was showing how important Mexican art has been to the foundation of American art, to the point that it's more formative than French.
Yeah, and you know, the importance of all of them in abstract expressionism here in the United States in the 40s and 50s and beyond. So yeah, it was really great, a great exhibit.
Well, I want to touch back on this concept of the whitewashing. More to the point, the mural was whitewashed due to its political nature. What do you think is the connection between great art and controversy and politics?
I believe, you know, the more I read Siqueiros and the more he believed that art, he was not afraid of portraying truths. Sometimes truth is difficult to see. And, you know, as an artist, you can't please everyone. So I think that it's important to you know, very much like documentary film, it's more of a, you know, it's truth, right? I mean, we make documentaries and you portray the reality of things, or you try to, right, and be balanced about it. Some people are not very balanced about it, but you know, a true documentary shows truth, and I feel that art has to portray truths, and sometimes those truths are very controversial. They're controversial topics, but they need to, you know, people need to know what's happening. And you know, I think that sometimes you have to be political, and art, you know, it's not for, it's supposed to be for Siqueiros, art had to be political. Art wasn't just supposed to be a pretty painting on the wall of flowers or decorative, had to have a message. And I feel, you know, that too is important for my, you know, what I wanted, the stories I want to tell. They're not just pretty things. They have, you know, they have to have substance. They have to have a message. And I think, I'm not sure if I answered your question, Eric, but
you answered it.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Great.
Well, murals that are being commissioned right now by the cities, do you feel that they tend to be as political in nature, as controversial, or do you feel that they approach murals in a very different way than what Siqueiros was able to accomplish?
Well, I think maybe commissions, it's a different animal. I think that you're trying to please someone. You know, in the case, I'm not really sure what cities, you know, it just depends on their agenda. But, you know, if it's just, you know, it can't just be advertising, you know, it just can't, but I think that there's definitely here in Los Angeles, there's been murals that have been whitewashed. I forget, about a few years ago, there was a mural that was whitewashed also for political reasons. Yeah, I think that the whitewashing, it has continued to happen. So certain people just don't want to see, you know, certain things. But you know, with Black Lives Matter, there was definitely there were murals out there that were produced, and I don't know that they were necessarily commissioned by a city. They were just, you know, expressions on the sidewalks of people or the walls, and you know, perhaps they weren't really necessarily commissioned. But I'd like to see cities to, you know, just tell more stories, and you know, in each community, kind of tell the story of each community. I think here in LA, there's a beautiful, you know, mural in Filipino town, for example, that was painted by a Filipino muralist. And yeah, I'd like to see more of that. I would love to see cities, but right now with the pandemic, I don't know that that's a big priority right now, you know, so.
Yeah, and when you're talking about commissioned murals, I mean, there are a lot of murals that are being put up essentially as graffiti, and graffiti has such an interesting political history to it as well. Do you differentiate between graffiti walls and murals?
Definitely, I think there's a big difference. But then again, there's graffiti art, you know, something in between. So I guess I'm not an expert in terms of like how to classify graffiti versus graffiti art versus muralism. I think that muralism has something to do more with like that you paint something for a community, or that you're commissioned, and it's okay to paint that on a wall, and it's conserved and it's preserved and it's, you know, respected. It's a piece of art, as opposed to just tagging or you know, graffiti. But you know, everyone should be able to express themselves, you know, whether it is for 5 minutes and then someone else comes and covers it. You know, I think, yeah, I think that commissioned, or, you know, I think I'm not an expert, but, you know, something that is lawful versus not. And if it's done on the run, it's, you know, but they say that Siqueiros was the first graffiti artist, because he actually used the materials that he used was, you know, were actually pretty out there. He used like car paint for his murals, and he used the painting gun, you know, like a compressed air, and, you know, not necessarily brushes, but he used everything. But he wasn't using the typical materials. You know, he actually used pyroxylin and duco paint, which was very, very different than what you know, most people were doing it during his time.
Does that allow the paint to stay on the wall for longer, or does it degrade faster?
I think he was just experimenting at the time. You know, I think that he liked the technique and he liked the paint, because that kind of paint you can create, like, you know, like when he taught Jackson Pollock the chorreado and the, you know, the drip painting, you know, it would create these amazing patterns on the canvas or the walls. And it's also fast, you know, if you use the spray gun, or, you know, it's a different technique. And so, but he was really experimenting, and he actually learned a lot of chemistry because, you know, he was a very curious person, and he was talking to chemists, and he made friends with people that worked at DuPont. And, you know, he really wanted to be able to use these new technologies that, you know, he's the kind of person that could never like rest. He was always very curious and trying different things. So
you referenced Pollock, and that Siqueiros taught Pollock the drip technique.
Yes.
Is there a reason that you think people don't tend to learn about that on a regular basis when they learn about Pollock?
So Siqueiros came to New York in 1936, and he opened what he called the experimental workshop in New York City. And many students, you know, he was already pretty famous. He had already come to Los Angeles, and people knew that he was a controversial kind of muralist, and that he knew how to, you know, create these huge paintings on walls. Yeah, he already had a reputation. So when he comes to New York, he actually, a lot of students at the time kind of became part of his workshop. And one of them was Jackson Pollock. This is 1936, and he actually helped you know, be part of this workshop. So Siqueiros at the time, he was already experimenting with these new painting techniques, right? With the spray gun, using pyroxylin and car type of paint. And so he was already, you know, it was just, the next step was just to do it on canvas, you know, on actual pieces of canvas. And so he actually initiated this technique of the drip painting, and so, yeah, of course, Pollock was one of his students, and he didn't only teach this technique to Pollock, but to all the other artists that were part of his workshop. But yeah, of course, one of them was Pollock. And I think because Siqueiros was so controversial, and eventually, you know, later in life, he was so political and very you know, immersed in the politics of the 20th century. I think that he was never given the credit, you know, plus he was a Mexican who had been deported from Los Angeles. And so, you know, it's like the typical story that people have, you know, they get erased, or they're not given the proper credit. So yeah, I think that the reason when people don't know this much is because, you know, his controversial political side. So yeah, which is a shame. But Vida Americana, that exhibit actually was fantastic at the Whitney Museum, because they actually go in depth about how Siqueiros actually taught Jackson Pollock and the influence he had on Jackson Pollock, moving forward with the strip technique later on in the 50s.
Well, wonderful, thank you for that. Now, to shift gears a little bit, the footage that you showed in this documentary was stunning. It had such an amazing range. How did you go about gaining access to this footage?
Oh, that was a huge endeavor. Yeah, so so the film has a lot of archival footage, and so the film, I would say about 80%, if not more, of the film is archival footage or art. So I had to go by, you know, with Artists' Rights Society. I had to kind of talk to them to get permission from the estate, from the Siqueiros estate in Mexico, to actually be able to even make the documentary about him. So yeah, I had to go through like all of the right steps to get access in that sense to his writings, not only his art, but also his writings. And then each, you know, he had work all over the world. And so I had, you know, we had an archival producer that really helped us get through all this. But in terms of the actual art that we filmed, we were really lucky. You know, I reached out to the city of Los Angeles, and they gave me access. I was able to film América Tropical, and I was able to like be right there, right next to it. I was very lucky that they gave me access to that. And you know, in Mexico, I just spent like a couple of weeks. I took several trips, and I knocked on doors, and I said that I was making this film about Siqueiros, and people were like, "Oh yeah, that's great. You know, Siqueiros has a great archive in Mexico City," and they were so happy, and they were very helpful. And you know, I was able to get knocking on doors and just telling people, you know, showing them the passion that it was important to tell the story and things. Sometimes it was hard, and it took forever to make this film. But it took us 10 years to make this film and to put it together the way you see it right now. So, and it took a lot of help from a lot of friends, and you know, a lot of people. So it's not just me. It's like you see it in the credits. There's so many sources, so many people that helped. So films aren't made by one person alone. I'm just representing. You know, it was my idea, but all these other people helped tremendously put this film together. And it was not easy. No.
It's not. But when I was watching your film, and this is more of a comment than a question, but I was so struck by the way you captured the artwork. The camera angles you used, the panning techniques, it almost looked like the art was moving. How long did it take you to master that technique? Okay, there was.
Oh, it was so hard. So Miguel Picker, who's also co-director with me on the film, he filmed most of all the Siqueiros murals, and we knew that Siqueiros' art was kinetic because that was one of the things that he really attempted to do. So he actually, we knew that he couldn't just film the images standing up, that he had to move, because that was the intention of Siqueiros, was that the spectator is not supposed to stay in one location, rather than, you know, people are supposed to just walk in the space and see the images move. And Siqueiros apparently loved to watch cartoons, and so he actually he had this thing about movement, and so we tried to capture that, and I think Miguel did an excellent job capturing, for example, the Hospital de la Raza, the beautiful Prometheus, you know, the big figure in red, that his arm sticks out, and you actually see the arm almost coming out of the wall. It's incredible, but it's really unfortunate that mural, it does not have a whole lot of access to people, because that's inside of the vestibule inside of the hospital in Mexico City. And so we were lucky that we were able, but we tried, we pushed Miguel. I pushed, several of us pushed Miguel in a wheelchair. Then, you know, he was in a gurney once, you know, filming from a gurney, and someone pushing the gurney so that he could actually capture the movement. And it was crazy. I mean, we had a lot of fun. We tried to actually, he actually just tried to capture the movement. It was, and you can see it in the film, but, you know, just seeing it in person is just so incredible. So if you're ever in Mexico City, just try to go to that hospital, you know, Hospital de la Raza in Mexico City, and you can see this incredible. I've never seen anything else, something like it ever in my life. I don't think none of the other muralists were able to capture movement this way. It's incredible.
Well, the creative ways you went about filming the mural really mirror the creative ways he went about painting his murals.
Yeah, it was, yeah, we really tried. It was so very difficult too, because, you know, the eye sees things differently than a lens. And so, you know, it was a very difficult thing to do, but Miguel was able to get some of it. So, yeah.
Well, another question I have is, well, first off, again, okay, I'm getting lost in my own thoughts for a second.
Go ahead.
Is there a talking point about this film that we haven't touched on yet that you want to share?
Yeah, I think that it's important to talk about art as not only as an expression of feelings, but also expression of the time, an expression of, you know, the struggle of communities and the struggle of people. And I think that that's really something that Siqueiros really tried to achieve, and the legacy that, you know, art being so important. And for him, art had to, you know, enter through the senses, that it was really important, that visual messages are even more important than written ones. And that, you know, and that they really should be accessible to everyone to see and enjoy. So yeah, I think, I don't know what else. Do you have any other questions or, you know, things?
There's one thing I was curious of watching this film, and it was because it wasn't until recently that I even heard of Siqueiros. I mean, I'm from California, and Siqueiros doesn't get spoken about in the same way as Diego Rivera.
Yeah, right.
Is there a reason why you could imagine that happening?
Yeah, actually, I believe that there's several reasons. So we hear a lot about Diego Rivera because Diego Rivera was like the most well-known artist of his time. You know, when he started painting. So there's a big age gap between Siqueiros and Rivera. So Rivera, well, you know, he went to Europe during the revolutionary period, during the Mexican Revolution. He continued to paint. He was there to paint because I'm not really sure how he afforded that, but he was sent to, you know, he was already a very established painter, and he's fantastic. You know, his murals are outstanding and beautiful. So everybody, of course, knows Rivera, right? And plus, he was married to Frida Kahlo. Who doesn't love Frida Kahlo? So, you know, I think that but he was an amazing artist in his own right. And Siqueiros, he spent a lot of time in jail, so he doesn't have the amount of you know, of murals or amount of art that Diego Rivera was able to do, because Diego Rivera, you know, he was also a communist at the time. So was Frida Kahlo. They were both communists, but they shared at the beginning of their friendship. They shared, you know, they started the Communist Party in Mexico, but I don't think Siqueiros was able to be as prolific because he was very comprometido, you know, in the politics. He actually didn't just say that he actually acted. He was in jail, I think like 20 times because he got in trouble with the government. You know, he couldn't, no tenía pelos en la lengua. I don't know, you translate that.
He has no filter.
He had no filter, exactly. He had no filter. And so whatever he thought, he expressed it in his art, and he spelled it out. And he was not afraid to speak truth to power. Versus, you know, I don't know about Rivera, but Rivera, I think he was not as you know, political perhaps, or but he was also an amazing artist. But Siqueiros didn't produce as much art because he spent a lot of time in jail. So so I think perhaps that's part of it. But also Siqueiros, I think he got a bad reputation because of his politics when he tried to kill Trotsky, you know. So anyway, that's another story that, you know, he was very revolutionary and very believed in his, he had very strong convictions politically. And so, you know, that could be also that he has not, he was kind of hidden from you know, I think that politics and might have been the reason also why he's not as well known, or was not as well known.
Well, thanks to your film, he's going to be more and more well known.
Yeah, I hope so. So I'm really thrilled that it's going to be seen by more people through the Philadelphia Film Festival.
I have one last question before I let you go, and yep. It's a hard question, and it's okay if you don't have an answer to this. Okay. But the role of murals, Los Angeles has become a focal point in the conversations on gentrification, and the roles of murals and gentrification have escalated. And the idea that a lot of murals make an area more welcoming to outsiders. What do you think the role of the connection between murals in Los Angeles and gentrification is now? It's a hard question. The answer is fine.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. I never thought about that. But, you know, like I live near Highland Park in Los Angeles, where it's gentrifying, and so is Boyle Heights, where, you know, there's so many beautiful murals. So is the Mission District in San Francisco, where you're from. You know, there's people, and it's really, I really hope that the people that are moving in, they actually have the respect of being able to keep that going and to preserve and conserve, you know, these beautiful murals that tell the story of the people that live there, and you know, that hopefully in my mind is like that they can coexist. You know, gentrification is something that's happening across in a lot of cities, and I feel that, you know, that cities have to protect, you know, these beautiful pieces of art that, you know, represent communities. The community in East LA, you know, the Chicano,
Yeah, well, I mean, I found that as murals become less political in certain areas, gentrification is increasing. As long as these murals have like these really political messages that make us uncomfortable, that speak to uncomfortable truths, then it seems those murals seem more grounded in the community. It's once we start seeing murals that are commissioned and completely unoffensive that I'm seeing gentrification just walk right in. But that's just a thought that I was having, and I was really wanted the opinion of somebody who has studied this in much more depth than I can possibly imagine. Again, thank you so much for this amazing film. Thank you for all the work you do, and I'm looking forward to seeing your next project, or maybe a biopic or a biopic of Siqueiros, the same way we had one of Frida, in case it might be something you're interested in doing one day.
No, I don't know about that. I mean, I've learned a lot about Siqueiros, you know, after studying him for 10 years, and, you know, reading his autobiography and reading he wrote a lot. So I feel that I've learned a lot about Siqueiros. So, you know, I feel like maybe someday I would cross over from nonfiction to fiction, maybe. But yeah, but I think that he deserves you know, to be more well known. Someone that, you know, some people at the time, and when he died in the 70s, early 70s, you know, compared him with Picasso. And, you know, it's like, wow, why don't more people know about him? So yeah, that was, you know, let's start with the documentary and see where it gets. But yeah, it wouldn't be a bad idea, I think, to actually do a biopic. And who would you want to be Siqueiros?
My God, I have
right?
no I can't even possibly imagine.
So in the Frida film, it was Antonio Banderas, but he's Spanish, right? So I don't know. I mean, I loved Antonio Banderas, but he did a fabulous job, but I can't imagine him being Siqueiros.
I mean, and these films can be so hard to make because Frida was only made because Salma Hayek was pushing for that for years. It was her pet project.
Right. And this is Frida, right? Frida Kahlo we're talking about. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think maybe Gael Garcia Marquez, is that his name?
Bernal,
yeah.
Bernal,
yeah.
Well, and Diego Luna was so fascinated by Cesar Chavez that he made the movie about him.
Right.
Oh, Manuel Peña, why not him? Yeah. Oh,
I mean, he's a great character. Siqueiros is a great character. It's like, it doesn't get any better than that, you know. I mean, the stories. I mean, PBS already made a documentary, 6-hour documentary, Ken Burns on Hemingway. I mean, seriously, 6 hours. Imagine the budget for that. If they could just, you know, spare some money for someone to make a film about Siqueiros, wouldn't that be great?
Yeah. I mean, look at all the films that were made about Pollock. I mean, there's films that are made about whether or not a piece of art is Pollock art.
Right.
Have the same budget for somebody that inspired him, that taught him. Yeah. I mean, that's what's really powerful. And there's such a large erasure of Latino contributions to the American cultural zeitgeist. And I'm glad that your film is contributing to ending that, to highlighting the wonderful diversity that is the United States.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, the contributions of people from Latin America, and, you know, that have had in this country, and the legacy and the huella, you know, the footsteps that they left behind. So yeah, let's hope that, you know, we have more budget to make films about people that are worth, you know, stories that are worth telling.
That is an important moment to end this on. Thank you so much. And Diego Luna, Gael Garcia Bernal, if you're listening, here's a biopic you can do it on. Contact Lorena to get this going. She could be an advisor for it.
I'd be happy to advise. Gael, are you kidding me? Yeah. So yeah, of course.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the film festival.
Yeah, enjoy the films.